It started as an ordinary Daystar broadcast until Rebecca Lamb said that one thing that changed everything. Her shocking confession sent shockwaves through the network, leaving Joni and Doug speechless and fans questioning everything they thought they knew about the Daystar family. No one expected this truth to come out live on air. What Rebecca revealed wasn't just personal, it was explosive, emotional, and it's tearing the ministry apart from the inside. For years, the Lamb family looked like a picture of faith and perfection. On television, they smiled under bright studio lights, preaching love, hope, and truth to millions of viewers. To the world, they were the shining example of a Christian family, united, blessed, and unbreakable. But behind the cameras, things weren't nearly as pure as they seemed. Rebecca Lamb, Marcus and Joni's daughter, lived with the weight of secrets she couldn't share. Her smile looked warm on screen, but it hid years of confusion, fear, and guilt. When Rebecca and her husband JW were asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement, it seemed harmless at first, just a way to protect the family's image and the ministry's reputation. But over time, it became something darker. The NDA didn't just cover finances or business matters. It reached deep into their personal lives, sealing away truths that shouldn't have been hidden. It became a tool of silence, a way to make sure that what happened behind closed doors never saw the light of day. Every time Rebecca thought about speaking up, the words of that contract echoed in her mind like a warning. Stay quiet or lose everything. The weight of that silence grew heavier with each passing year. She watched things unfold that made her uneasy, behavior that didn't align with the values her family preached to millions. There were moments she couldn't shake, moments that made her question the people she loved most. She worried for the innocent, for the ones who didn't have a voice, but the NDA kept her trapped. It wasn't just a legal document, it was emotional chains wrapped around her faith and her conscience. Rebecca prayed constantly, asking God if staying silent was the right thing, or if it made her part of the problem. Her heart told her one thing, but the world she lived in demanded another. Loyalty had always been a core value in the Lamb family. Protect the name, protect the ministry, no matter the cost. But deep down, Rebecca began to wonder if loyalty without truth was really loyalty at all. The pressure to keep smiling, to keep pretending everything was fine, became unbearable. On screen, she was the daughter of Christian royalty. Off screen, she was a woman slowly breaking under the weight of secrets that were never meant to be hers to carry. The sanctuary that had once felt like home now felt like a cage, and the walls of silence were closing in tighter every day. When Marcus Lamb passed away in 2021, it felt like the ground beneath Rebecca's feet disappeared. Her father wasn't just her dad. He was the heart of the family, the steady voice behind every sermon, the one who made everyone believe that faith could hold them together no matter what. His death left more than just sadness. It left a silence that no one seemed able to fill. Daystar, the family's ministry, had always been about unity and strength, but now everything felt fragile, like a glass that could shatter with one wrong move. In the first few months after Marcus's passing, Rebecca tried to stay strong. She did what her father would have wanted. She comforted viewers, smiled on screen, prayed with her mother, and tried to hold the family together. But behind the smiles and polite interviews, grief was tearing at her. Her home felt different. Her faith felt different. Even her family didn't seem the same anymore. Her mother, Joni, who had always been the bright and commanding presence in the family, seemed to change too. There was a heaviness about her, a kind of restlessness that made Rebecca worry. When Joni started spending more time with Dr. Dougweiss, a Christian counselor and longtime family friend, Rebecca didn't think much of it at first. She knew her mother was lonely, and Doug had a reputation for helping people heal after loss. But soon, the friendship turned into something deeper. The two were appearing together in photos, sharing smiles on social media, and giving interviews about love, faith, and new beginnings. To the outside world, it looked like a touching story, a widow finding hope again. But to Rebecca, it felt like a wound that hadn't been given time to heal. Her father had been gone less than a year. The pain was still fresh. Seeing her mother move on so quickly felt like betrayal wrapped in confusion. Rebecca tried to understand. She told herself that grief looks different for everyone, that maybe this was her mother's way of coping. But each new photo, each cheerful video post made her heart sink deeper. The same woman who once preached about patience, loyalty, and the sacredness of marriage was now rewriting her own story in real time and doing it in front of millions of viewers. The public praise for Joni and Doug's love story only made things worse. People online called it inspiring. They said it showed how God could bring joy after pain. But Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that something sacred had been lost. She tried to talk to her mother about it. She approached her gently, hoping to connect as one grieving woman to another. "Are you sure this is the right time?" she asked one night. But Joni's reaction was sharp, defensive. She told Rebecca that she was being judgmental, that she didn't understand what it meant to live alone after decades of marriage. The conversation ended with tears and silence. Rebecca walked away feeling smaller, unheard, and more distant than ever before. That was when the cracks in their once close bond began to widen. The family dinners became tense. The ministry meetings grew colder. Decisions about Daystar, something that had always been a family effort, were suddenly being made without her. It was as if Joni and Doug were slowly reshaping not just the ministry, but the family's entire identity. Rebecca felt like an outsider in the very world she'd helped build. She began to notice little things: new faces at the office, changes in programming, subtle shifts in tone during broadcasts. Daystar was becoming something different, something that didn't feel like her father's vision anymore. And every time she thought about speaking up, she remembered the NDA. That document was still there, looming over her like a shadow. It reminded her that some truths could destroy everything if spoken aloud. Her faith, the thing that had always guided her, started to feel complicated. She prayed every night, asking God for clarity, for peace, for strength to know what to do. But even prayer started to feel heavy. Was she protecting her family by staying quiet, or was she protecting the wrong things? Each question led to another, and the answers never came. She thought about her father often, his laugh, his sermons, the way he always said truth and love should walk hand in hand. He would have wanted honesty, but he also would have wanted peace. And Rebecca couldn't find a way to have both. The more she tried to balance them, the more they pulled her apart. Every Sunday, when she sat in church or watched her mother preach on screen, she felt the same ache in her chest. Love mixed with sorrow, faith mixed with doubt. She wasn't angry at her mother, not really. She just felt lost. The family she had known, the foundation that had seemed so strong, was breaking apart before her eyes. There were nights when she'd sit alone, scrolling through old videos of her parents together, her father preaching, her mother smiling beside him, partners in faith and life. They looked unstoppable then. Now it was just her, trying to make sense of what was left. She missed her mother, even though they still spoke. She missed her father more than words could express. And she missed the simple faith she used to have, the kind that made sense before secrets, contracts, and betrayal clouded everything. Rebecca's heart was torn between loyalty and truth, between love for her family and the growing need to stand up for what was right. She didn't know it yet, but this struggle, this quiet war between faith and reality, would lead her to make the hardest and most courageous decision of her life. For years, Rebecca Lamb lived in silence, carrying the kind of secret that keeps you awake at night. The NDA she and her husband JW had signed was supposed to protect the family name, to keep the image of unity that Daystar had built for decades. But for Rebecca, it became a chain around her soul. She wanted to believe it was the right thing, that protecting the ministry also meant protecting her faith. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Each time she looked at the people she loved, especially the youngest members of the family, she felt a quiet panic rise in her chest. She knew too much, and saying nothing made her feel like she was betraying the very values she'd been raised to defend. There were nights when she sat alone in the dark, scrolling through old photos and wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Her family, once so close, now felt like strangers bound together by fear and money. Every time she thought about breaking her silence, her hands would shake. She knew what the NDA meant: lawsuits, financial ruin, public shame. But more than that, it meant her mother's anger, her family's rejection, the loss of everything she'd ever known. So she prayed. Over and over again, she asked God for a sign, for some kind of light in the dark. For a long time, there was nothing but silence. Then, in early 2024, the world shifted. A new law passed in Texas. Trey's Law. It was named after a young boy who had been a victim of abuse, a case that exposed how NDAs were being used to protect the powerful while silencing the innocent. Under this new law, no one could use a non-disclosure agreement to hide child abuse or misconduct. When Rebecca read about it, she froze. Her heart started pounding. She read the article twice, then 3 times, just to be sure she understood. For years, she had prayed for freedom, and now, suddenly, it was here. She felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The NDA no longer had the power to keep her silent. She could finally tell the truth without fear of being sued, silenced, or erased. That night, she sat at the kitchen table with JW. The house was quiet. They had stacks of old documents spread out between them, copies of the NDA, old emails, notes she had written to herself but never sent. "If we do this," JW said quietly, "there's no going back." Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know," she whispered, "but I can't live like this anymore." They prayed together, asking God for courage, for strength, for protection. And in that moment, Rebecca knew that breaking her silence wasn't rebellion. It was obedience. It wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about truth and about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The next morning, she wrote her statement. It wasn't long or dramatic. It wasn't filled with accusations or bitterness. It was simple and heartfelt. She told the truth about the silence she had been forced to keep, about the pain of being legally bound to secrecy, while her heart screamed for justice. When Rebecca finally shared her story, the world stopped. Within hours, it spread across social media. People were stunned. Some praised her for her bravery, calling her a voice for the voiceless. Others called her a traitor, accusing her of tearing down her family's ministry for attention. The backlash was instant and brutal. But Rebecca stayed calm. She knew that truth would always divide people, especially when it came from a place that claimed holiness. At first, it felt like too much to handle. The calls, the interviews, the flood of messages, some kind, some cruel. Her mother refused to speak to her. Old friends stopped returning her texts. The world she'd grown up in, the only world she'd ever known, turned its back on her. But even through the pain, Rebecca felt something new blooming inside her: freedom. She no longer had to hide. She could finally look in the mirror and know that she had done what was right. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca's story became bigger than she ever imagined. Victims from other ministries, other families, and even outside the church world began reaching out. They shared their own stories, how they too had been silenced by NDAs, how fear had kept them quiet. Trey's Law had started a movement, and Rebecca had become its unexpected face. People began to see her not as a rebel, but as someone who had stood up for truth in a world that punished honesty. But even as others celebrated her courage, Rebecca carried a quiet grief. She missed her mother. She missed the sense of belonging that had once defined her family. But she also knew that some things couldn't stay hidden forever. Light has a way of finding cracks in the darkest rooms. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to let that light in. In her quieter moments, Rebecca thought back to all the years she had spent praying for a sign. She realized that God hadn't been silent. He had been waiting, waiting for her to be ready, waiting for the world to change, waiting for the truth to finally be free. Trey's Law wasn't just a legal victory. It was a message, a reminder that faith without truth isn't faith at all. And for Rebecca Lamb, that truth became the turning point that saved her soul. When Rebecca Lamb finally broke her silence, the world around her didn't explode all at once. It cracked slowly, piece by piece, like glass under pressure. At first, it was just whispers, a few uncertain posts online, some quiet speculation in Christian circles. People didn't want to believe it. The Lamb family was one of the most respected names in faith broadcasting. For decades, they had been seen as a beacon of light, a model of Christian family values. The idea that something dark could exist behind that image felt impossible. But once Rebecca's words began to spread, the whispers became a roar. Within days, the story was everywhere. Headlines blazed across the internet. Talk shows debated it. Churches discussed it behind closed doors. People were divided. Some called Rebecca brave, while others called her a betrayer. The Christian community, which had always rallied around the Lamb name, didn't know what to do. For years, they had watched Rebecca grow up on screen. Now, they were watching her become the one thing no one expected, the truth teller who shattered the silence. Inside the family, things got cold fast. Calls went unanswered. Messages were left on read. People who had once been her allies avoided her in public. Her mother, Joni, was furious. She felt blindsided and betrayed. To her, Rebecca's confession wasn't courage. It was rebellion. She couldn't see that her daughter's decision came from pain, not anger. Their once close bond was reduced to silence, broken only by brief, distant texts. "Hope you're doing okay. Praying for you." They were words without warmth, written more out of habit than love. At Daystar, the atmosphere shifted overnight. Employees whispered in hallways. Longtime supporters canceled donations. Board meetings turned tense. The network scrambled to do damage control. Publicly, they avoided mentioning Rebecca's name. Privately, they blamed her for the chaos. Some people called for her to be cut off completely, to remove her from everything related to the ministry. For Rebecca, it felt like a second exile. The first had been the NDA that kept her silent. This one was the punishment for finally speaking the truth. The online backlash hit hard. People she'd never met attacked her faith, her motives, her character. Strangers accused her of lying for attention. Others claimed she was being used by the media to destroy Christianity. It hurt deeply, but Rebecca expected it. Truth has a price, and she was paying it in full. She had spent her whole life being taught that faith and obedience meant keeping peace, smiling through the pain, and never airing family struggles in public. But she now understood that peace built on lies isn't peace at all. It's control. Her husband, JW, stood by her through it all. On nights when the comments online got too cruel, he would take her phone and turn it off. "You did the right thing," he would remind her softly. Truth always costs something, but lies cost more. They prayed together every night, not for approval or vindication, but for peace. The kind of peace that can only come from knowing you've done what's right, even when it hurts. Still, the loneliness was heavy. Rebecca had lost more than her family's trust. She had lost her entire community. The people she once worshipped beside now avoided her. Invitations to church events disappeared. Her name was whispered like a warning. There were moments when she questioned everything. Had she gone too far? Could she have handled it differently? But every time doubt crept in, she remembered why she had spoken. For the innocent, for the silenced, for the truth that had been buried under fear. Months passed, and something unexpected began to happen. While some people turned their backs, others began to reach out. Quietly, at first. Survivors of abuse, former ministry workers, and ordinary believers who had been silenced by their own churches started sending her messages. They thanked her for her courage. They said her story gave them the strength to tell their own. Trey's Law had opened a door, but Rebecca's voice had given people the courage to walk through it. She didn't see herself as a hero. She still cried often. She still missed her family. But she began to realize that the freedom she had found wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who had ever been told to stay quiet in the name of faith. Her pain had a purpose now. Her silence had turned into something powerful, a ripple that was changing lives. Churches began having uncomfortable conversations about accountability. Ministries reviewed their policies. The cracks that her truth had made were letting in light. Still, the personal cost was steep. Rebecca longed for reconciliation with her mother. There were times she'd pick up her phone, ready to call Joni, but she always stopped. The wound was still too raw. And yet, in her heart, she never stopped loving her. She prayed for her every night, not out of bitterness, but out of hope that one day they might find peace again. The love between them wasn't gone. It was buried under years of pride and pain, waiting for grace to uncover it. Over time, the noise around the scandal began to fade. The headlines moved on to other stories. The internet found new things to argue about. And in the quiet that followed, Rebecca began to rebuild. She and JW moved out of the spotlight, focusing on their faith, their marriage, and helping others heal. She started volunteering at a local outreach center, working with survivors who had been silenced by fear or shame. For the first time in years, she wasn't pretending. She wasn't performing for cameras or following a script. She was just Rebecca, imperfect, honest, free. Her faith changed too. It wasn't the polished, stage-ready version she had grown up with. It was raw, personal, and real. She no longer saw God as someone watching from above with a list of rules, but as a friend who sat with her through every sleepless night and tearful prayer. She had learned that faith isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about showing up when everything hurts and still believing there's purpose in the pain. Rebecca's story became a quiet kind of inspiration. She didn't write books or start a new ministry. She didn't seek interviews or attention. She let her actions speak, through kindness, through truth, through the steady peace that now filled her home. People who met her were often surprised by how calm she was. They expected anger, regret, maybe even bitterness, but all they found was peace. The kind that doesn't come from victory, but from surrender, from finally letting go of the need to be understood or forgiven, and simply living in truth. Looking back, Rebecca realized that the fallout, all the loss, all the heartbreak, had been the price of freedom. But it was worth it, because in losing the world she had known, she had found herself. The woman who had once been bound by fear was now unshakable. Her voice, once silenced, had become her greatest weapon. And though the scars would always remain, they were proof of survival, reminders that truth, even when it hurts, is the only path to real peace. The Lamb Empire might never be the same, and her relationship with her family might never fully heal. But Rebecca had made her choice. She had chosen faith over fear, truth over silence, and love over appearances. And as she looked out at the quiet Texas sky, she finally felt what she'd been praying for all along. Not fame, not forgiveness, but freedom.